Hello, friend, and welcome back to episode number 17 of my 31-day challenge, where I am answering your questions on how to create a career or a business that you love. And in today's episode, quite a funny one, I found this one quite amusing to kind of think about. How do you land your first 5-figure job? So we'll be diving into that. It's going to be fun. If you've got a question, you can reach out to me. You can ask me a question on any of the social medias. Alex Makes VR is my handle. Usually hang out on Instagram and Twitter mostly. You can send me a longer question at alexmakesvr@gmail.com. And every single day that I do these, I am sending out a newsletter to let people know when they go live. The episodes are live with the sound of music. Okay, you didn't come here for a musical, but you're welcome. You can sign up for those newsletters at alexmakesvr.com. Like I say, I send them out daily and they give you a bit of a recap as well about what are some of the things I talk about in the episode. So with that said, let's dive in. So, how do you land your first 5-figure job? It's interesting because I don't do a lot of prep for these podcasts. You've probably noted that. The way I treat them is as if someone had asked me in conversation, or if I was speaking at an event and someone had asked a question in the Q&A section. I try and treat these podcasts as if it's like the first thing that comes to mind. I'm not overthinking things. I'm not like deep diving. Generally speaking, I'm reading the question and then just kind of going off the cuff and just giving you my advice based on my real world experience. And it might not always be right, but it's just kind of like what I've known to be true and just my kind of the initial gut feeling, because so much of that is where the kind of the gold, the truth is, rather than overthinking it and making it so it's super concise and it hits on all these different points and, you know, it's playing to the podcast algorithms to make you want to listen to the whole thing. No, I'd rather it be authentic, as if we are actually having a conversation, as if you've just asked me that question and I'm just rabbiting on, which I do quite well, in case you haven't noticed. But with this question, it did give me pause. It did make me think about the first time that I landed a 5-figure job. And I remember it being a real milestone. Like, I remember because I'd worked on productions that were, 7 figures plus, like 7-8 figures in my TV career. I knew the kind of stuff that went into being involved on a production of that caliber, at that kind of level. But it's very, very different to be the person that goes out and pitches the work and wins the contract at that level. And I think every milestone in business is exciting. If you're going from someone that's never done any client work before, you've never worked for yourself, landing a 3-figure, landing that first £400 or $400 job is exciting. And then, the first time that someone pays you £2,000-3,000 to do something, you're like, I cannot believe this. I've just made what would be most people's monthly salary in a matter of days. Like, how exciting. Like, so absolutely every kind of like step along that journey is so exciting, and it's totally different. And the feeling that you get from landing a 5 or 6-figure contract when you've built up from charging a day rate or working in an industry where you're paid salary, it's super exciting, and it's absolutely a place for you to take stock and realize your progress and be proud of like the skills and the business that you're building. But having said that, there are a lot of strings that come attached, and every time you level up, there is more and more risk and pressure and responsibility to deliver. So that's the kind of caveat. And I'm going to talk about how you can go about landing that first 5-figure job. But just know that sometimes actually charging the 4 figures and being able to have a weekend off, or charging your day rate, which is most likely 3 figures, and being able to have your evenings off, there is freedom in that. So I want you to take stock of that. And obviously, landing your first 5-figure job will differ drastically depending on what kind of business that you have, what kind of service you provide, what kind of thing you're working on. But generally speaking, in order to land a 5-figure job, so $10,000 or pounds plus, or whatever currency you're working in, you will need significant amount of social proof that you can deliver a project of that caliber. Because all of a sudden, you're working, that is a massive chunk of money that someone is dedicating and risking on you. If someone is paying you a minimum of £10,000 for a project, that means that to their business, it's going to have to be worth at least double, if not 5-10 times that. So if a business is willing to pay you £10,000 or dollars for something in the realm of VR or 360 or, augmented reality, whatever immersive kind of stuff that you're working on, it will have to be worth a lot more back to them, which means that the kind of client that will spend 5 figures with you must already be a pretty big company. So I would say that for a company that is willing to spend that amount of money, you're going to be looking at a company that is substantially bigger than just like a mom and pop shop. So you're going to be looking at potentially like a nationwide kind of business. So a name that at least is national, if not international. They will most likely have at least a 10 million turnover plus, because in order to have, because the thing is, it's like, if you're doing a job that is worth 10,000, you're not their only supplier, and VR is a very, 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 very tiny part of what else is going on in the business. So just imagine how much money they will need to be making as a company in order to invest 10,000 plus for your work. So that's the first thing. So you need to go after a big kind of client. Now, in order to go after a big client, you're going to need social proof. You're going to need to prove that you've worked with kind of those kind of that kind of caliber of client before. And don't get me wrong, you don't have to have prove that you've worked on a project that's been worth $10,000 plus before, but you do have to have the proof that you've worked with a company of that size or a project of that scale before. So I'm trying to cast my mind back to the first time that I landed a job for 5 figures, but I'm fairly certain it would have been, I probably should have thought a little bit more about what that job actually was, but it definitely wouldn't have been a shoot that I did myself. It would have been a project that would have had a few other pieces of the puzzle. Kind of, it would have been a professional 360 video shoot, not photography. And it would have been part of a bigger, probably training plan. In fact, coming to think of it, I'm fairly certain I remember the job, which was the first kind of 5-figure thing. And I'm fairly certain that it was a training program that was going to be rolled out nationally by a company. And so it was quite a hefty production. And this wasn't a $10,000 job. This was a bit more, this was more than that. But, when I say it was 5 figures, it was 5 figures for everything, right? So the contract was worth 5 figures. That included all of the time that I would go and meet with the client, and their offices actually were in, they weren't in London. Where were they based? Birmingham, I want to say. So basically not where I live. So that money had to account for all the times that I were going back and forth to their offices. all the endless phone calls and meetings about what they wanted from this project, because again, that's not a cheap amount of money to just throw at a project. There's a lot of money to any kind of company, no matter how big or small they are. They're going to consider before they, like, you know, even if I work with clients now that literally are multi-billion-dollar companies, and they still won't, they will be analysing what you're charging them, and they will want to kind of make sure that they're getting the maximum amount of value. You'd think that, like, when an organisation, when you think of them having a turnover of billions, you'd think that, you know, tens of thousands is nothing to them. But that's just not true, because every single team, well, often a company of that size won't actually be operating as one unit. It's like separate companies in different territories around the world. And then within those companies, you've got different teams which have their own allocated budgets. And within those budgets, they'll have allocated amounts that they're allowed to spend on certain things. And if they want to spend that kind of money, they will have to get it signed off on multiple levels. So that fee doesn't just include, you know, rocking up on set, filming a little 360, editing it for a few days, bing bang bosh, done. That amount of money is all of the time project managing, then pulling together a crew and making sure that the production itself is of a really high quality, because if you're charging that much money, you best believe that they want to see like the best quality. Obviously, you've not just got the post-production, but you've got the amends that come with the post-production, because now it's not just one person signing off, it's, you know, multiple people getting opinions on the post-production. And then once they've had their opinions and they've signed off and they're happy, then it has to go to the next department to get cleared. So often it takes much longer. So I would say since I started working on bigger productions, I would say the average length of a 360 shoot for me went from like a production from start to finish would start off probably in the space of like maybe like 2 weeks working on small projects, going from like talking about the idea, getting it signed off, going and shooting it, editing it, stitching it, all of that jazz, sending it back to client, getting it signed off. Maybe a 2-week window for those first ever kind of clients, those small one woman band type, going out, doing it all myself, 2 weeks. As soon as you start to work on a 5-figure contract plus, you know, when you get to 6 figures, you start to stretch out that timeline. So all of a sudden, it might sound great landing a contract that's worth, you know, 30, 40, 50 grand, but actually you maybe could have done 10 $5,000 like dollar jobs and had way more time to yourself, way more space in your brain, way more weekends off, way more time to kind of deload and decompress in between jobs, rather than I remember the last really major project that I did, which was a much bigger project. It went on for, it wasn't too long, but it did go on for a good few months. But the stress related to that project, because there were so many moving pieces, I mean, it was, don't get me wrong, it was an absolutely brilliant experience working with one of my favourite clients to date. Really exciting project, really exciting crew, really exciting kind of content, really passionate about the script that I wrote for it and everything. All brilliant stuff. But the stress that comes with working on a production that big when you're the captain of that ship, and I think we've talked about this before in a previous episode in this series, but the stress is sometimes not worth it. So if you do want to land a 5-figure job, my recommendation, build up your kind of social proof that you have worked on jobs with those kind of bigger clients. So get those portfolio pieces with recognizable brands, whether that be, you know, doing some stuff for free to add to your portfolio, or getting in with maybe like the creative agencies that work with those brands and trying to get in as like extra resource, or offering the VR component to a traditional shoot, that kind of thing. Start to work your way up in terms of the kind of companies you work for. Maybe even like start, if you've got like a chain, I don't know, let's use the example of like Hilton hotels. If you've got a Hilton hotel in your area, maybe start by offering something to them, and then maybe trying to kind of say, you know, happy to do this for cheaper or for free or something, with the idea that your marketing person talks to like the director of marketing for the whole Hilton UK kind of chains, with the view to kind of get a meeting kind of thing. And if this goes well and proves well, you know, using that as kind of like a stepping stone to get into all of the other chains. And then you're starting to work on a kind of a bigger level. There's more responsibility, there's more, you know, where there's more risk, there's more reward, basically. Yeah, that's how I would, that's like the stepping stone to getting those jobs. But like I say, I mean, there are probably some fantastic 360 photographers or one man band or one woman band videographers that are like charging 5 figures just purely for their services. But I think they're probably few and far between. And if they are doing those kind of work, it's probably like a much bigger and longer retainer kind of contract. So one of the best 360 photographers I know, he's absolutely incredible. I have no idea like to what extent, like how much he charges for projects. But I know that because he shoots such incredible work, like high quality DSLR, like beautiful, stunning, I think they're called like megapixel photos or something. So they're not just 360, but they're also like, you could literally zoom in, you know, 100 times and the image would be crystal clear, like phenomenal. It bends my mind to try and think about the technicality of his talent. But someone like him, he might be able to go out and land like a contract for like, you know, 3 events or something that pays 5 figures, or he might be able to leverage the fact that he can do that and sell a package of, let's say, I don't know, 10 of those for $5,000 each. Again, that's how maybe you can kind of start to charge 5 figures. So instead of, if you don't want to scale up and work on bigger productions with more people, bringing more kind of team on, having more stress, working for much longer periods of times on one project, maybe it's about looking at what you do offer and trying to package it up. So maybe if you do virtual tours and you charge $1,000 for one really decent one, then maybe once you've done one, maybe you try and sell a package of 10 at some point, and that's how you land your first 5 figures. But what this all comes down to, and it's similar to the kind of answer that I gave in the very first episode, which is you really need to just work out like what lifestyle you want and what kind of job you want. And do you want the kind of job where you move from being the person who's making all the creative decisions to actually being more of a project manager who's just constantly kind of like being the one to liaise with the client? Do you want to turn into more of a manager in order to grow a business, knowing that on that 5 figures, your profit is not going to be 5 figures. Your profit is probably going to be similar to the kind of profit that you would make being a one-person band going out by yourself and doing like a few jobs rather than, you know, just working on this one. But do you want that? Is that a challenge that you would quite like to experience? And obviously there's nothing wrong with doing that and then realizing, like I have, actually, you know what, that's not for me. Because as much as it was fun and as much as it was absolutely a goal of mine, and the first time I landed like a 6-figure contract, I bought my family like a meal and we celebrated, and I was so excited because it was such a big landmark moment in my business. But actually, after doing it a few times, like you kind of get to the point where you're like, actually, is it worth it? Because the amount of money that you end up making at the end of it, like the profit on it, is the same as if you had done just a few jobs on a much smaller scale and you'd made a bit more profit because you were doing more. You were doing more of the legwork. You were doing more of the creative, the stuff that you love. So just things to kind of keep in mind. But to recap, if you do want to try and go after that 5-figure client, firstly, let's build up those those portfolio cases. Let's go after slightly bigger clients who have like a national presence. And let's kind of understand that you either need to start packaging, so you're selling bigger packages of stuff. So instead of just one virtual tour or one training video, you're selling a suite of them. Or you have to sell a bigger production, full stop, which means that you will most likely have to bring more people in. And just know that the expectation from your client, the difference in expectation from 4 figures to 5 figures is absolutely huge. The difference between someone spending a few grand on something and someone spending 30 grand on something, as you can imagine, is absolutely massive. I mean, if you think about it, think about what it would be like if someone came to you and said, can I have the equivalent of like 1 or 1.5 months worth of your salary, please? And I will promise you that I will try my best to not only give you that money back, but also make you more money as a result. You'd be like, well, I mean, it's risky, but I believe in you. You've shown proof that you've done it. So, okay, here's 1.5 months of my salary. Please try your best to make something that's going to make me money like back. Now imagine if someone came to you and said, can I have roughly your annual salary? So I want you to give me your annual salary. And again, I'm going to try my best to make something that makes you that back and more, but I can't guarantee that. Imagine the risk. Now, of course, it's slightly different on a personal basis versus a big corporation, but that is the level of risk that you're asking someone to take. So just be mindful of that and be empathetic that when you're negotiating contracts, yes, it's not that person's actual salary on the line, although if they are deemed to have messed up and allocated budget that they shouldn't have to something that was a waste of time and a waste of money, that could very well be the end of their job. But just try and think about it in that sense and realize just what you're asking that person to do. So it's very exciting. It's very rewarding. It's very exhilarating to land that first 5-figure job because it's a massive step up from landing a 4-figure job. But just remember like the other person on the side and what they might be thinking. And again, it comes back to putting yourself in their shoes, and that will guide you in terms of negotiating those kind of contracts. So I hope that helps. I'm excited to hear your thoughts on this. I think so much of us who, especially when you first get into business, you get so excited and like, you know, the goal moves constantly, but just remember as well to take some time to celebrate those wins. Like I've had at least 3 or 4 people reach out this week to let me know that they've been listening to the podcast and that they've won their first ever clients. And I'm so excited about that. That's huge. Take stock of that. You know, don't go rushing ahead and thinking, okay, now I've won 1 client. Now how do I get to 10 clients? How do I get to, you know, obviously have those goals, but just take a second to realize that that's a huge leap to go from never having done any client work before to landing your first client. Celebrate that. That's amazing. Go you. That's awesome. And if you are the person that's listening to all of these and this is something you want to do, but you haven't jumped yet, just do it. I promise you, you will not regret it. It's the hardest thing to go from not working for yourself to then having a side hustle or a main business where you are working for yourself, but it will be so rewarding. And the truth is you just need to start. And then when you get that ball rolling, the momentum just goes. And before you know it, you'll be saying, Alex, I've done my first 6-figure job and I don't know what you're talking about. I love it. And I'm going to be a millionaire by this time next year. And I'll be like, fair play to you. Fair play to you. If you've got a follow-up or a question that you want to ask, you can send it to me on social media, Alex Makes VR on Instagram and Twitter. If you've got a longer question, you can send it to me at alexmakesvr@gmail.com. And if you want to be reminded every single day when these podcasts go live, I send out a newsletter daily. You can sign up for it at alexmakesvr.com. And with that said, I hope you're having a fabulous day wherever you are in the world. And I'll speak to you tomorrow.